Good morning, everybody. I'm Jeremy Summeray from Armstrong World Industries, Armstrong Sealing Systems. So we're now going from the previous presentation to the world of buildings and building interiors. And I'm going to give you a perspective from a manufacturer. So how does somebody in the supply chain making materials for buildings respond to the circular economy? How do we address this issue? And I'm going to take you through that, and I hope towards at the end of the presentation I'm going to give you some insights and some lessons that we've learned. What you hear about a lot is these great projects, but at the end of it you go, well, that's fine, but how did you do it? What happened along the way? How do I start this process? So I'm just going to give you our story of how we started on this journey with circularity. Just so you are clear about what we do, we manufacture ceilings, and you can see some examples there on the slide. Schools, hospitals, airports, railway stations, shops, hotels, and so on. And you can probably just about see in the pictures that they are modular in design. They're square, they're rectangular, and they sit in a grid system. So we start in a very good place because you can deconstruct these ceilings. People don't tend to do it until now, historically, but you can see that we've actually got a good opportunity to play our role in the circular economy. So you're going to get my perspective, a manufacturer's perspective, on the impacts we can have on this agenda. So I wanted to start with, why did we do it? Why did we bother to start this journey, and why and how did we do it? And it's all these things here. But these things we had to get in place before we could engage the business to move forward. And the first one is accelerate. And the logic behind this one is, if you wait for government to tell you what to do, or to legislate, or to provide regulations, or you wait for your shareholders to give you some instructions about what they want you to do as a business, we'll never get there. It takes far too long. So I wanted to find a way where we could accelerate change within the business without relying on external factors, particularly government. I needed to engage the business. I can't tell you how many times it's difficult to explain this concept of circular economy. So how do we translate that into something that's really understandable for everybody? And how do we get away from this very technical debate about materials, how they're made, what they're made of, how long they last, and so on? So how do you engage the business? What about a vision? We heard a little bit earlier about how you use creativity. So we need to get beyond just mitigating a few bad impacts into some sort of vision. We also wanted somebody external to Armstrong to look at what we were doing and to give us some oversight and, if you like, some approval, some certification around what we were doing. I also needed to not make one step, but a series of steps. So that's continuous improvement. And I needed a simple message in the business. It sounds a lot, but you'll see in the next subsequent slides how we went about doing that. And in my view, these are the key things we needed to put in place, and I think most manufacturers need to put in place. Maybe many organizations need to adopt some of these principles if they're truly going to change what they do. It might just be worth pointing out that a sealing plant, for example, our last one we built a few years ago, was 100 million euros, and it will last about 40 years. So decisions we made 5 years ago will have a massive impact for decades. And I'm now dealing with decisions that were made 40 years ago in terms of the materials that are now coming back from the market. So it's great when we talk about circular systems and new products and innovation, but we've also got to deal with what we've currently got today. So the way we approached it, the way I approached it, was to look at this idea of cradle-to-cradle certified product. And for those of you that are around later today, you'll hear a keynote speech from Dr. Michael Braungart, who was one of the co-authors of Cradle-to-Cradle, Remaking the Way We Make Things. And this is a certified standard, a product standard that we adopted back in 2012. And it's got those 5 elements that you can see on the screen. And this is really important from my perspective, that it's all very well talking about waste and material recovery and recycling, but fundamentally you need to know what's in the materials. Are we just using more and more bad stuff to make more and more product? Because that's a real problem in terms of recycling. Let's go back 30 or 40 years. We were making materials with asbestos. We didn't know then, but look at the legacy impact. And there are other materials that we're continually now removing from the supply chain because we understand the negative impacts. So what goes into a product is just as important as recovering it from the market. Material reutilization is fairly straightforward, recovering materials from the market. And by the way, yes, we eliminate the concept of waste, because waste is food, it's a nutrient for another system. Waste in itself isn't bad, so long as you can find additional uses for it again and again. And then you broaden out this idea of thinking beyond waste to think about renewable energy, water stewardship, and the way we organize ourselves and behave as a business in terms of supply chain. So we are now asking our suppliers to tell us what's in the materials we buy from them, and we're trying to encourage some of them to adopt these principles and also certify their products. So we're all about transparency. So that was the mechanism that got us, if you like, from the old way of thinking about sustainability to thinking about circularity. Here's an example of a scorecard. It's a bit tricky to read, but the overall certification level here is a bronze, because let's say the worst performing element here is renewable energy and carbon. But what I like about this is it's very clear about where this manufacturer would need to start work. And this isn't our particular scorecard, we have them for our products, but if I were the product manager for this particular product range, I know that I need to start looking about the energy consumption to make the product. I'm pretty good on material health, I've got some good materials, I've got a good reuse, recycling, repurposing program. I'm pretty good on social fairness. So you can see how cradle-to-cradle design and cradle-to-cradle product standard helps me as a manufacturer to think about how I make these incremental steps to improve. And here is one example. I'm just going to take you through this because I think there's a number of key learnings from this that link all the way through to cradle-to-cradle design, recycling, and the cradle-to-cradle product standard. It's a recycling program that we've run now for perhaps about 15 years. It's pan-European. This is just an example from the UK, where ceilings are dismounted by the contractors on the job site, they're palletized, put in a truck, taken back to the plant, recycled into new ceilings. Not always possible to reuse ceilings, because they might have been in situ for 15 or 20 years, discolored, damaged, and so on. We can take them back, put them back into the process with no additional processing, and out comes a new ceiling tile. We will take back competitors' tiles, and that's completely unique in the market. There are no minimum quantities, and we're also partnering with supply chain, i.e. distributors. So the more of this stuff that we can get back, we can reduce our overall impacts in terms of energy and water, we can drive up the recycled content, and we can do it over and over and over again. And the product that comes out of the process is then cradle-to-cradle certified. So you can see there's quite a nice story going on here. For those of you that know the building industry well, you'll know that there are these green building rating tools like LEED, BREEAM, and so on, and they all recognize or award credits for recycling programs. And in the case of LEED and the SCAR system in the UK, they award credits for cradle-to-cradle certified product. And some of you may also be familiar with the WELL building standard that also awards credits. I'm not sure if they're called credits, but there is an award for cradle-to-cradle certified product. So we're beginning to see now design tools recognizing products that have some kind of transparency attached to them. And then bottom left, you can see the business case. It's absolutely fundamental to this. What drives the recycling is avoiding waste to landfill, which is a cost to a contractor. So all the way through the supply chain, there should be good reasons not to throw things into landfill. And just to give you an example, most of our success has been in the retail sector, which is not what we imagined when we first launched the program. So what we're now finding is people like Aldi, Lidl, McDonald's, H&M, C&A, Ahold, which is a big retailer in the Netherlands, and many others. They like the program because we go into their stores when they're refurbishing, and a retailer often refurbishes 5, 8, 10 years, sometimes in fashion retail like C&A every 3 to 4 years, and they're beginning to realize that they simply cannot design stores and then throw the material away when they renovate in 3 to 5 years. So we will go in, remove the ceilings, and then install a new ceiling, cradle-to-cradle certified, and again, when that cycle comes around, we'll take the materials out. So we never realized this when we started, but we're now beginning to see certain segments in the market starting to understand the need for maintaining materials in the economy for longer. And then just to finish up here, on the right-hand side, to talk a bit about cradle-to-cradle design. And it starts to pick up on this idea of material health I talked about. Let's not put more bad stuff into the economy. Design for disassembly and recovery and reuse. And if it can't be done, then let's recycle so that it can be put back into the new products. And value chain collaboration. That's a key factor that we found with the program. This only works if you've got architects, designers, contractors, installers, the waste industry and the distribution industry engaged in the whole process. So it's now started to bring the supply chain together. And I haven't talked about it, but I think it's all very well to talk about the materials, but what about the impact on the people in the buildings? And that's the top left at sort of 10, 11 o'clock. Impact of buildings on health, well-being and productivity. And that links very strongly with this idea of material health. Let's not put bad stuff into the products because it's having a negative impact on the people in the building. So there are lots of things that we can do as manufacturers of product that have a beneficial impact on the people in buildings. And then on the left-hand side, if you like, are the kind of my key takeouts from our journey. This idea of being less bad is not the same as being good. And again, you'll hear that from Dr. Michael Braungart later on this afternoon. It's not about just reducing our impacts a little bit. Wouldn't it be good if we could reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 20%? It's not going to make a difference. We have to rethink the way that we design buildings. The making of things is destructive. Every time we make something, something is destroyed. So again, you need to bear that in mind. It's always a destructive process. So we don't, let's not think about it as a pollution problem, which is traditionally how we approach this. Let's think about it as a design problem. And that starts to take you into the world of innovation. We heard that from the last speaker. So rather than thinking again about let's not pollute, we hear it a lot, particularly in London, about air quality. How we might be able to reduce the impact of, for example, diesel car emissions on the London air quality. It's the wrong way of looking about it. We should set an ambition, which is what air quality do we want and how do we deliver that? So let's get away from this idea that it's a pollution problem and think about it as a design problem. And then the vision around cradle to cradle, if you like, and also circular economy is safe, healthy, and endlessly reusable materials. And that cradle-to-cradle design frames buildings for disassembly and reuse. And think of buildings as a material bank. All the buildings around us in the built environment have materials which are, if you like, a bank of materials which can be used again and again in later buildings. And the cradle-to-cradle product certification gives you this verifying of positive materials for circular systems. And my sort of final point here is what did we learn from this process? And I think the fundamental one is that we learned by doing. We started a process, and over the 8 or 10 years, we've now started to realize what the next steps are. So by putting your toe in the water, doing something is better than doing nothing, and waiting for the government to tell you what to do, in my view, is going to take too long. Thank you.